December 19, 1944, a former French army barracks in Verdun. Inside, the highest-ranking Allied generals sat around a large table, faces tense and grim. Just 3 days earlier, over 200,000 German soldiers had smashed through the American lines in the Ardennes forest. The attack came completely out of nowhere, catching Allied intelligence off guard. American units were being surrounded, overrun, and annihilated. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower had called this emergency meeting to assess the situation and determine how to stop the disaster. The situation was critical. The 101st Airborne Division was surrounded in Bastogne. If the town fell, German armor could split the Allied armies in two, potentially reaching the coast and disrupting the entire Western Front. Eisenhower scanned the room and asked the crucial question: how soon can we launch an attack north to relieve Bastogne? The generals fell silent. Maps were spread across the table, commanders studying troop positions, supply lines, terrain, and winter conditions. Logistics were complex. Roads were narrow and icy, and disengaging units already in combat seemed nearly impossible. Then George Patton spoke. "I can attack with 2 divisions in 48 hours, he said. Heads turned. Some thought he was joking. Others assumed he was grandstanding. 48 hours to disengage divisions from active combat, rotate an entire army 90 degrees, move over 100,000 men and thousands of vehicles through snow and ice, and launch a coordinated attack against entrenched German positions. Operationally, it sounded impossible. Every general in the room knew it. But Patton wasn't bluffing. He wasn't boasting. He had anticipated this attack and had been preparing for it for 11 days. 10 days earlier, on December 9, 1944, at Patton's headquarters in Nancy, France, Colonel Oscar Koch, Patton's chief intelligence officer, entered the office carrying a stack of reports that would shape the coming battle. Koch had been meticulously tracking German movements across the Western Front and had noticed something alarming. 15 German divisions, including several panzer divisions, had disappeared from their positions. Usual positions. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAEF, assumed these divisions were in reserve, ready to respond to any Allied breakthrough. Koch didn't believe it. He had studied German military patterns for months. Germany did not hold 15 divisions in reserve without a purpose. These were offensive forces, sufficient for a major attack. Koch laid out his maps on Patton's desk, pointing to the Ardennes, a thinly defended sector where American forces were spread across miles of front. "General," he said, "I believe the Germans are planning a major counteroffensive. Their target is the Ardennes." Patton studied the maps carefully. The Ardennes was held by only 4 American divisions, where 12 would have been necessary. The terrain was rugged, densely forested, and the roads were narrow and difficult to navigate in winter. For SHAEF, this seemed like the perfect obstacle to prevent a German assault. But Koch reminded Patton of history. In 1940, the Germans had done precisely this, attacking through the Ardennes and reaching the English Channel in 6 weeks, toppling France. Further evidence convinced Patton. German radio traffic spiked in the region. Prisoners reported new units arriving, and locals observed unusual activity behind German lines. Patton asked Koch when the attack might begin. Koch replied immediately, within 2 weeks. Patton then called his immediate superior, General Omar Bradley, explaining Koch's analysis. Bradley listened politely, but remained skeptical. Allied intelligence believed Germany was defeated and lacked the strength for a large-scale offensive. Bradley told Patton not to worry. But Patton didn't dismiss Koch's assessment. Instead, he gave direct orders: start planning. Over the next 10 days, Patton's staff worked secretly, developing 3 detailed contingency plans. Each plan covered every possible scenario: specific routes for trucks and tanks, pre-positioned fuel supplies, artillery batteries ready to redeploy, infantry units assigned assembly points and roads. Every variable was considered, every potential complication anticipated. Other officers thought their general had lost his mind. At the time, the Third Army was engaged in offensive operations in the Saar region, pushing toward Germany. Why plan for a crisis 100 miles north? Patton trusted Koch's intelligence more than he trusted SHAEF's assumptions. On December 12th, Patton held a meeting with his senior commanders, instructing them to be ready to disengage at a moment's notice. He didn't explain why, but his men trusted him. By December 15th, the Third Army was the only major American formation prepared for an Ardennes emergency. Elsewhere along the front, units remained focused on their own sectors, confident the war would be over by Christmas. At 5:30 a.m., December 16th, German artillery erupted along an 80-mile front. Thousands of shells rained down on American positions, followed by infantry and then tanks. 3 German armies, over 200,000 men, struck 4 American divisions. The Americans were outnumbered nearly 4-1. Quiet sectors suddenly erupted into deadly combat. Communication lines were severed. Commanders lost contact with troops. At SHAEF headquarters, initial reports were dismissed as minor counterattacks. Only hours later did the full scale of the assault become clear. At Bradley's headquarters, disbelief spread. This couldn't be happening. Allied intelligence had assured them Germany was finished. Meanwhile, at Third Army headquarters, Patton received the first reports. He looked at Coach and said simply, "You were right." Bastogne was the target, a crucial road junction, and Antwerp was next. Patton immediately contacted his generals. The contingency plans were now in motion. While other headquarters scrambled in confusion, the Third Army was already moving, every detail accounted for, every supply cache positioned, every route pre-planned. Patton wasn't performing a miracle. He was executing a plan prepared days in advance. The movement of the Third Army began on the night of December 19, 1944. Imagine the scale of what was happening. Not a single battalion, but an entire army, over 100,000 men, thousands of tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, all moving simultaneously, all following meticulously prepared routes, all under the freezing winter skies of the Ardennes. The snow was thick, the ice relentless, temperatures plummeting below freezing. Vehicles stalled, engines froze. Men suffered frostbite, but the operation did not pause. Every division, every unit, every convoy moved according to Patton's contingency plans, which had been refined over 11 days of preparation. By the morning of December 21st, the lead elements of the 4th Armored Division were already in position, having traveled more than 100 miles in less than 48 hours. They had disengaged from ongoing combat in the Saar region and now faced the daunting challenge of breaking through German defensive lines to reach Bastogne. On December 22nd, the Third Army launched its attack. The fighting was immediate, brutal, and relentless. German forces had fortified every mile with obstacles, tanks, machine gun nests, and artillery. Fields were frozen solid, forests dense, villages fortified. Every step northward was met with fierce resistance. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division clung to the town's defense. Ammunition was low, rations scarce, medical supplies nearly exhausted. They had been under siege for 6 days. When German officers demanded surrender, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe responded with a single word that would echo through history: nuts. The paratroopers knew that relief was coming, because someone had anticipated the German attack long before it began. Patton's genius was in preparation. By December 26th, at 4:50 a.m., the lead tank of the 4th Armored Division, Cobra King, broke through the last German positions at Ardennes. Inside, they made contact with the 101st Airborne. The siege of Bastogne had been lifted. Patton immediately called Eisenhower. "We're through to Bastogne." Relief convoys began rolling into the town, bringing ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The 101st could finally breathe, resupply, and continue fighting. While the tactical victory at Bastogne was decisive, the broader implications were even more striking. The German offensive, though initially successful in creating chaos, had been disrupted entirely by Patton's rapid response. Over 19,000 American soldiers had been killed. more than 47,000 wounded, and another 23,000 captured or missing. The cost was immense. Yet, without Patton's swift action, these losses could have been far greater. The Germans might have split the Allied forces, capturing critical road junctions and potentially changing the course of the war in Western Europe. The intelligence story behind the Ardennes offensive was equally critical. How had 200,000 German soldiers achieved complete surprise? How had 15 divisions seemingly vanished without anyone noticing? The answer lay in preparation and perception. Oskar Koch, Patton's intelligence officer, had been the only person to notice the signs. He had tracked the German units, analyzed their movements, and identified the likely targets. Schaeff had dismissed his reports, believing Germany no longer had the strength to launch such an operation. Patton, however, trusted Koch implicitly. He acted on the intelligence, turned it into detailed plans, and executed them flawlessly. After the war, Allied intelligence officers interrogated captured German commanders to understand how the Ardennes offensive had been planned. The Germans expected to reach the Meuse River within 4 days and take Antwerp in 2 weeks. They had assumed the American response would be slow, disorganized, and hesitant. What they had not counted on was George Patton and the meticulous planning of the Third Army. German officers admitted that Patton's rapid counterattack had completely disrupted their timetable. General Gunther Blumentritt, chief of staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, later wrote that Patton had reacted faster than anyone could have imagined. Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army in the Ardennes, was even more specific. "We knew Patton would react quickly, but we did not know he had prepared for our attack." The difference, they realized, was the work of Oskar Koch. His intelligence had been accurate, but without a commander willing to trust it and act decisively, it would have been useless. Patton's preparedness showcased a fundamental principle of warfare. Intelligence matters only if it is acted upon. Preparation is invaluable only when leaders have the vision to implement it. While most commanders relied on assumptions and conventional wisdom, Patton relied on evidence, analysis, and foresight. The Ardennes offensive was a stunning example of what could be achieved when preparation, intelligence, and decisive leadership intersected. Through the winter forest of the Ardennes, over snow and ice, Patton's army moved with relentless purpose. His orders were precise, his execution flawless. Each division understood the broader plan. Each officer knew their role, and every soldier contributed to a coordinated effort that turned potential disaster into a tactical victory. This was not luck, chance, or improvisation. This was methodical, deliberate, and inspired leadership grounded in intelligence that few others had trusted. The Battle of Bastogne became emblematic of Patton's approach: rapid, aggressive, decisive, and entirely dependent on preparation. While the world remembered the heroism of the 101st Airborne, few outside military circles knew the full story. The intelligence warnings, the planning that started 11 days before the first shot, the orchestration of an entire army through frozen roads and winter storms, and the coordination of thousands of vehicles and troops. Patton had been the architect of relief before the first shell even fell. Even decades later, historians studying the Ardennes offensive would recognize that without Patton, the consequences might have been catastrophic. The German plan relied on surprise, overconfidence, and the assumption that Allied intelligence would fail. They underestimated one commander's ability to act on foresight, to trust his staff, and to move with speed that defied conventional wisdom. Patton's leadership did not just save Bastogne. It preserved the integrity of the Allied front in Western Europe and ensured that Germany's last major offensive would falter under his relentless counterattack. After the relief of Bastogne, the Third Army did not pause. Patton knew that momentum was crucial. The Ardennes offensive, though disrupted, was not yet over. German forces remained in the field, entrenched in defensive positions, regrouping where they could. Patton's counteroffensive aimed not just to relieve Bastogne, but to push back the Germans, reclaim lost territory, and restore the integrity of the Allied front. His plan required precise coordination, armored divisions leading the assault, infantry securing flanks, artillery providing constant support, and supply lines moving forward without delay. The logistical challenge was immense. Roads were narrow and icy. Trucks carrying fuel, ammunition, and provisions risked sliding into ditches, and convoys frequently stalled. Yet Patton's staff had preemptively planned for these contingencies. Secondary routes were identified, fuel caches pre-positioned, and engineer units ready to repair or clear obstructions. The operation was a massive orchestration, a ballet of machinery and manpower moving in perfect synchrony across the frozen Ardennes. By December 27th, elements of the Third Army had penetrated deep into German lines, forcing retreat and disarray. German commanders, already shocked by the speed of Patton's relief, now faced an even harsher reality. Units that had expected a disorganized, delayed American response were met with relentless pursuit. Communications between German divisions became erratic. Orders were misinterpreted or ignored. Frontline commanders were left to make decisions without guidance, often leading to catastrophic errors. Patton's advance exploited these weaknesses with surgical precision, striking at weak points, cutting off retreat routes, and forcing enemy units into surrender or annihilation. One of the most remarkable aspects of this campaign was Patton's ability to maintain coordination across such a vast front. The Third Army's divisions were spread over miles of terrain, yet each unit moved with clarity and purpose. Commanders on the ground knew their objectives and the timing required to achieve them. Supply lines functioned under immense pressure. Even when vehicles broke down or roads became impassable, alternative routes were immediately utilized. Every contingency that could have slowed the advance had already been anticipated. The impact of Patton's counterattack extended beyond immediate tactical gains. It restored confidence across the Allied armies. Units that had been demoralized.
Die initiale deutschen Offensive nun sah, dass rapide, decidene Aktion möglich war. Moral sorgte. Soldaten, die fürchteten Einkreisung und Defeat, fanden sich Part einer koordinierten Aktion, den nämlich Enemy back zu drücken. Pattons Exempel demonstrierte die Power von Initiative, Präparation und Leadership in Shaping des Outcomes von Battle. Meanwhile, German forces struggled to adapt. Die initiale Offensive, welche versprach, die alliierten Armeen zu spalten und kritische logistische Hubs zu capturen, war nun kollabiert. Die Ardennen, einst die Stage für eine bolde German Gamble, wurde eine Trap. Units waren overextended, supplies dwindlend und reinforcements scarce. Pattons relentlose Anvars ließ keinen Ruhm für German Recovery. Bei der First Week von Januar 1945, die Third Army hatte most of the territory regained during the initial German assault. Der Enemys offensive Kapazität hatte gebrochen und die Ardennen waren förmlich unter alliierter Kontrolle. Pattons Vorsicht und Präparation waren erneut konfirmiert. Jeder Schritt der Counteroffensive traced back zu Intelligence gathered und analysiert Tage bevor der German-Attacke begann. Oskar Kochs Prädiktionen hatten akkurat gewesen. Aber es war Pattons decidene Aktion, das Knowledge into Results. Das Success der Relief- und Counterattacke highlightete die kritische Rolle von Leadership in der Interpretation von Intelligence und converting it into effective operations. Ohne solche Leadership wäre selbst die beste Intelligence ungenutzt und ineffektiv geblieben. Beyond the battlefield, die Ardennes Campaign ließ lasting lessons für Militärstrategisten. Die Germans hatten auf Surprise, Speed und die Annahme, dass alliierte Forces statisch und prädiktiv gesetzt waren. Pattons Response demonstrierte das Gegenteil. Adaptabilität, Preemptive Planning und rapide Exekution könnten selbst die most audacious enemy plans neutralisieren. Die Importanz von Trauen auf Intelligenzoffiziere und bereit zu sein für Kontingenzen wurde eine endurende Prinzip von Militärkommando. Commander konnten nicht länger allein auf konventionelle Weisheit relyen, sie hatten zu antizipieren und Akt deciden, wenn Opportunities auftraten. Der Human Cost der Ardennes-Offensive remained staggering. Thousands of American
900 Allied soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured. German losses were equally severe, with entire divisions shattered and their operational effectiveness permanently reduced. Yet, the strategic outcome was clear. The German army had exhausted its last major offensive in the West, and the Allies had regained the initiative. Patton's actions were pivotal in turning what could have been disaster into a decisive strategic advantage. In the broader context of the war, Patton's leadership in the Ardennes exemplified a rare combination of audacity and preparation. Unlike commanders who reacted slowly, waiting for complete information, Patton acted on analysis, foresight, and intuition honed over decades of military experience. He understood that in war, speed, aggression, and initiative could outweigh numerical superiority or firepower. His decisions not only saved Bastogne, but ensured that the German offensive failed entirely. When historians later examined the Ardennes offensive, they consistently noted the speed, decisiveness, and coordination of the Third Army. Patton's role was central to this success. While other generals struggled to adapt, he had already implemented a plan that anticipated enemy actions and prepared his forces for every contingency. The Ardennes, which could have become a German triumph, instead highlighted Patton's mastery of mobile warfare and his unique ability to combine intelligence, planning, and execution under extreme pressure. Patton's campaign through the Ardennes remained a textbook example of operational brilliance. It showcased the importance of trust between a commander and his staff, the power of preemptive planning, and the value of decisive leadership. For every unit, every soldier, and every vehicle, there was a role, a timing, and a purpose. The success of the relief of Bastogne and the subsequent counteroffensive underscored that preparation and action, when executed together, could alter the course of entire campaigns. As the Ardennes campaign drew to a close in January 1945, the full impact of Patton's leadership became undeniable. The German offensive had been repelled, their ambitions shattered, and the Allies had regained the initiative. Incited the initiative in Western Europe. Yet, the lessons of the Battle of the Bulge extended far beyond territory gained or lost. They were lessons in leadership, foresight, and the power of preparation. Patton's ability to act decisively in the face of uncertainty distinguished him from other commanders and left a lasting mark on military history. The relief of Bastogne remained the defining moment of the Ardennes campaign. Surrounded and outnumbered, the 101st Airborne had held the town against overwhelming odds. Ammunition ran low, food dwindled, and medical supplies were critically scarce. Yet they endured, confident that relief was coming. Patton's rapid response proved that this confidence was justified. When the 4th Armored Division and the supporting units of the Third Army broke through German lines, it was more than a tactical victory. It was a testament to the power of preparation and trust between a commander and his staff. Behind the scenes, Oscar Koch's intelligence work had been pivotal. Koch had meticulously tracked German movements, analyzed patterns, and identified the Ardennes as the likely target for the German counteroffensive. While other Allied intelligence offices dismissed the evidence, Koch's analysis reached Patton, who trusted it implicitly. Without Koch's foresight and Patton's decisiveness, the Ardennes could have become a catastrophic defeat. Instead, the Third Army's rapid and coordinated response turned the German gamble into a failure. The broader implications of the Ardennes offensive were profound. German forces had committed some of their best divisions, including armored units, in an attempt to split the Allied armies. They had calculated that surprise and audacity would overcome Allied defenses. Patton, anticipating the attack, exploited the German reliance on assumptions. By preparing contingency plans in advance and moving rapidly, he neutralized the element of surprise and forced the Germans into reactive, disorganized maneuvers. The outcome demonstrated that initiative, when combined with preparation, could decisively influence the course of battle. Patton's operational approach highlighted a key principle of warfare: speed. Ed and aggression could outweigh superior numbers or firepower. While conventional military doctrine emphasized careful planning and methodical advances, Patton embraced boldness and calculated risk. His preemptive planning, coordination of multiple divisions, and precise timing ensured that each action reinforced the next. The Third Army did not merely respond to the German offensive, it imposed its own tempo on the battlefield, dictating the terms of engagement and leaving the enemy unable to recover. The human dimension of the Ardennes campaign further underscored Patton's effectiveness. Soldiers witnessed a commander who acted decisively, trusted his staff, and maintained clarity amid chaos. Morale, often fragile in extreme conditions, surged under his leadership. Men who had faced the terror of encirclement and overwhelming enemy strength found renewed confidence in their ability to succeed. Patton's influence extended beyond strategy and logistics. It inspired those around him to perform at levels they may not have believed possible. The German perspective further illustrated the uniqueness of Patton's command. Allied intelligence officers later interrogated captured German commanders to understand how the Ardennes offensive had failed. They admitted that they had anticipated slow American responses, but Patton's rapid counterattack disrupted every expectation. The German timetable for capturing the Meuse and advancing toward Antwerp was obliterated. Commanders who had counted on predictable American movements were forced into improvised retreats, suffering heavy losses and permanent disruption to their units. Strategically, the Ardennes marked the last major German offensive on the Western Front. Their failure accelerated the collapse of the Third Reich and set the stage for the final Allied push into Germany. Patton's actions ensured that the Allies maintained momentum, preventing the Germans from regaining any strategic advantage. Every division, every tank, every logistical movement coordinated by Patton contributed to a broader outcome that shaped the closing months of the European theater. Despite the magnitude of his achievement, Patton received limited recognition. Incited official recognition for the relief of Bastogne. Historical accounts often highlighted the performance of the Third Army, but rarely did they acknowledge the 11 days of preparation and contingency planning that made it possible. Similarly, Oscar Koch's critical intelligence contributions remained largely unknown outside military intelligence circles. Yet within the profession, the success of the Ardennes counteroffensive became a case study in how leadership, foresight, and trust in one's staff could alter the course of history. Patton's legacy from the Ardennes campaign extended into the fundamental principles of modern warfare. Commanders learned the importance of anticipating enemy actions, preparing for multiple scenarios, and acting decisively when the moment arrived. Intelligence alone was not enough. It had to be translated into operational plans and executed with precision. Preparation and action were inseparable, and the Ardennes campaign demonstrated this principle with unparalleled clarity. As the winter of 1945 progressed, the Third Army continued its advance into Germany, maintaining pressure on retreating German forces. Patton's aggressive approach ensured that the momentum gained in the Ardennes was not lost. His combination of strategic insight, operational planning, and audacious execution set him apart from his peers. While other generals reacted to events, Patton shaped them. He exemplified the rare commander who could convert knowledge into action, risk into advantage, and preparation into decisive victory. Ultimately, the Battle of the Bulge and the relief of Bastogne stand as enduring examples of the impact of leadership and foresight. Patton's ability to anticipate enemy actions, trust his intelligence staff, and execute a complex counteroffensive under extreme conditions saved thousands of lives, preserved Allied positions, and dealt a critical blow to German forces. His performance during those critical days reinforced a timeless truth. In war, preparation, decisiveness, and audacity can change the course of history. The Ardennes offensive would be remembered not just as a battle of strategy and force, but as a testament to the audacity of exceptional vision and leadership of George S. Patton.